The Survivor Specialists are back, and today I am joined by Owen Knight from Survivor 43 to predict episode 13 of Survivor 47, technically the finale part 1, as it is being called by CBS and Jeff and all of them. So we're going to get potentially 2 boots, although Mike Bloom teased it could be left off at a to be continued at the second Tribal Council. But Owen, how do you feel about getting 2 2-hour episodes to end this season?
I feel jealous is the main thing. They get so much extra content, but I'm excited. It's a little annoying, especially if they do the to be continued. That's going to it's going to do what they want it to do, is have people like clamoring for more. So I guess that's the idea, but it's good. Hopefully we get to see a little bit more of the discussion, because sometimes in the new era, 3-hour finales, really it's like 2.5 hours. So it could be slightly more content prior to the after show, which might make some of those like 6th place, 5th place tribal councils a little yet less yada yada than they have been in previous seasons. So we'll see. I'm optimistic. I think the editors have been killing it this season. They did such a good job with this past episode. So I have all the faith in the world that they're going to give us something fun.
Yeah, and so you were at the Rob Has a Podcast event in Houston this past week for this episode, correct?
I was.
How was that, especially this Ocean's 11 type editing and all of that? How was that with the live crowd there?
Oh, it went great. I mean, everyone was eating it up. Like, there were a lot of laughs. Like, there was a lot of suspense. Like, I think you could hear in the room the collective, like, oh my God, this is what they're doing. Like, with some of like the swipe across, like editing. And it was really cool to see people having fun with it. And then, of course, like the final vote reveal was like electric. Like, there's nothing like watching Survivor with hundreds of people. Like, it's so cool every time. So it was a great episode to watch with people.
Yeah, and we had a fun one too when we did it in New Orleans. You somehow found time during your wedding week to come out and get there, and that was the Tiana boot.
That was another good one. Yeah,
that was a really good one, and that was the first time I'd been to a live event since the 40. Or I went to Ben's premiere party last year, but then I hadn't. That one also, it was kind of hard to hear, and it's a premiere, so it's a little bit different of a feel. But that was the first time I'd been to like a real like boot episode since the 44 finale, and it was just so much fun to be there. And I mean, like, just to hear everybody's reactions and the initial takes beforehand. So with how you were watching this last episode, who did you actually think was going home? Did you think they were going to pull this off?
I was actually unsure, which made it even more fun. I think they did a really nice job with the edit of making us feel like, oh, this could go wrong, or like they've laid it out so perfectly, they might just pull it off. And I was of the opinion that I thought maybe Andy was being a little too forceful about splitting the vote. Like, I was like, dude, like, pump the brakes, like, you might be giving it away. So I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but I'm glad it worked out. And I just actually tweeted something about this, or I put it on Blue Sky, but at the live show, like, Rob asked me right after, like in front of 400 people, I was like, was this a good move or a bad move for Andy? And I was like, I'm not sure. Like, and I guess maybe bad, because like, I don't know, he might go next. But I've realized I don't like calling moves good or bad. Like, it really is about like, how much did it change the game state? How much did it change your chances of winning? Like, yes, there's a higher likelihood that he goes home next, but there's a higher likelihood he wins if he somehow gets his ass in the final 3. So we'll see. But it was an iconic move. Like, the planning, the execution, all the different elements of it. It was amazing. It was really, really fun to watch.
Yeah, and I mean, you were part of probably the biggest move of the new era, one of the top 2, because Marianne's could be up there too when she got rid of Omer. But when Jesse got rid of Cody, and, everybody knew Jesse was a threat at that point, but that especially solidified it as like, no, Jesse, you're the top threat, and now there's no Cody to protect you. But at the same time, does Jesse beat Cody at the end? I mean, I know that your cast has talked a little bit back and forth about that. It seems like it was more of a 50-50 shot than maybe the audience understands. And that's where I'm coming at with Andy's move here, right? Andy, to me, was drawing dead. He had made no move, and it seemed like the players were actually kind of poking fun at him on the island. They forget he's there. We don't care what Andy's going to do. He's got nothing. And then he makes this move. And I know the jury made their comment about Andy flipped again, which I want to hear what you think about that. But if Andy doesn't make this move, what's his story at final 3? He can't just say, oh, I had a bad day 1, and now look at me. He needs to have this on his resume.
Right. And as someone who did kind of go to Final Tribal with like, hey, I overcame a lot to be here. And like, obviously not as dramatic, but it didn't really work, because, modern juries, they want to see control over the game. They want to see impactful strategy. And so for that reason, it is huge for Andy that he pulled this off, because now he's got something to hang his hat on. The only like counterpoint I might say is like, it would have been a lot better if he had gotten out Rachel. Like, right? Like, obviously Caroline was a great player. I know we mentioned this when we talked in November in person, but you know, she was kind of building up this like kind of sneaky winner type of situation where she might be the one who could pop out at the end. So it's not like it was a huge trophy hunt for Andy, but it really helped him get a grasp on things. So yeah. And then to your point about oh wait, I totally just blanked.
That
the
comment.
coffee hasn't. Oh, the comment. Yes, exactly.
Comment.
The comment. Andy flipped again. That does make me nervous, because I think Sierra obviously has an axe to grind with Andy. He was part of her demise, and I couldn't tell who said it. I think I read online that someone said they think Saul was the one who said it.
I thought it was Gabe, and then somebody said it was Saul, and I think that has kind of become canon at this point now. I think everybody understands it as Saul said it, which I was surprised because I didn't feel like Saul really had an issue.
Right. And that was my confusion when I saw someone attribute it to him. So either way, whoever, regardless of who said it, that to me read as negative, and read to me as something as when those people get back to Ponderosa, they're going to be chit-chatting about like, oh my gosh, Andy, like, I think it's hard because like, regardless of how out of character or not the meltdown was after the first immunity challenge, that set the table for every subsequent thing that Andy does, right? Like, it's hard to look at Andy without that context for them, because especially for people who weren't on his tribe in the first half of the game, that was like one of the only things they saw him do for the first like 2 weeks of the game, right? So it's scary that could be a narrative that's being built for him, and makes me wonder, like, even if he somehow gets to the final three, like how people will receive him there.
Well, and that's a really good point, because the one thing Survivor has never shown, really, like almost, I mean, you could probably count it on two hands, the amount of times they've shown it, is one tribe actually discussing the actions of other tribe members, like from a different tribe. We very rarely see that. I think back in Thailand, we might have had it when Clay got choked by Rob, you know, but like very rarely do we see that type of conversation. And we didn't see it on this season. But you're right. There's two tribes that are going back from that immunity challenge. And you know that there's going to be part of the conversation that is, man, what's up with that guy? Oh my gosh. And how do you overcome that when now, like you said, for 14 days or 10 days or whatever it is, these people don't even talk to Andy. They don't know Andy. And they see that and they say, okay, they might have kept him around, but we can still kind of use that as the butt of our jokes, because at that point, he's not really a person to them, right? Like he's a person, but he doesn't mean anything to anybody else.
Right. And that's the tricky part of the game. And it is interesting. I would have paid a lot of money just to see like every tribe coming back from that first immunity challenge, just being like, whoo boy, like, so this is how this season's going to go. But all this to say, I've really enjoyed Andy, like watching him noodle through this, the strategy for this episode and kind of setting the table. It was so reminiscent of Jesse. Like, it felt like he left no detail untouched. Like the fact that Sam and Genevieve had to throw the challenge, like that didn't even cross my mind when I was watching the episode. Like just so many little things. And they're so fortunate that they had so much time at the sanctuary to map all of this out. But it really shows that he's operating at a very high level. And I know it's always so easy to reference what happened on day 3 for him, but like I think he's really found his place and like has improved a lot. But I'm curious your opinion, because when we watched the Tiana Boot episode, we were talking about the edit, right? And how your friends make fun of you because you look at the edit so much, but like it's literally the television show trying to tell us something. So where did you think prior to this episode Andy was headed, and now where do you think he's headed?
So prior to this episode, I felt like Andy was either going to be like 5th or 6th. Like this is truly where I felt. I didn't feel like he was going to go last week, and I think I have the power rankings to back that up. But I felt like if he got to final 3, he was a 0-vote finalist. Now I feel like if he gets to final 3, depending on who he's sitting next to, he could win, but more than likely I see him as 2nd place, right? If he gets there, I think he would get a couple votes from people who said, actually, Caroline, right? For example, Caroline is a very positive influence on this tribe. And I feel like when she goes to Ponderosa, they might all be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe Andy bought. And I could see her being like, you all got to be happy for this guy. Look at what he just pulled off. Because even in her final words, that's what she says. But I never ever felt that he had any chance of winning. I was watching Edgic. Will was telling me, no, Andy's got this. He can pull this off, all of that stuff. And I just never saw it, ever. But after this week, to me, he probably jumps up to second or third most likely to win. That being said, if he sits next to Genevieve, I still think Genevieve absolutely destroys him. But what do you think?
Yeah, so I really love that breakdown. I was so confused by his edit because he is the main character, right? Like we're getting told so much of his story, but there was still so many like elements of that story that were presented with kind of the dodo music, with kind of the like, oh, look at this guy kind of energy. Like they leave him humping every challenge in there, like the slow-mo of him licking the sandy volleyball. Like there's so much in there that is like poking a little fun at him and is like silly. And not something you see with a Kim Spradlin or Tony. Tony's a bad example, but you get what I'm saying. Like, it's not
Tony
the classic.
did speak llama,
yeah, exactly. But so I was like, what are they trying to do with him? And it was really puzzling to me. So I was always of the opinion I didn't think he was going to win. I thought, he goes far. I didn't see him as the final boss necessarily, but now I wonder after this episode, is he kind of in that Jesse position where, he must be taken out? Because here, like, I think Rachel is the most likely to win, but I don't necessarily think she's perceived as 100% the most threatening. Like she is perceived as a threat, which is why Andy wanted to go after her this week. But I don't think she's as like terrifying and obviously the best like Jesse was to me, Cass and Gabler, right? Like no shade to me and my friends there, but like, Jesse was totally on a different level. Whereas I think there are kind of tiers of threats. So yeah, I'm curious to see how it goes for him. But I get it now why we got so much Andy after this move happened. But it was such an interesting kind of unraveling of like, I guess that's the story they're telling is like the metamorphosis from where's the applause for my coconut Andy to now pulling off like the heist of the century Andy. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's where I thought he was getting the Journey edit, right? And a lot of times the Journey edit falls at 4 or 5. Like that's where we saw David Wright go. That's where we saw like even Emily Flippin, she got the Journey edit and she only made it to 7. So I feel like there's like that was the edit I was seeing. I didn't think he was actually going to sit at final 3 based on the edit that we were seeing from him. But then when you did hear the dodo music and stuff like that, I can't help but say to myself, that's a 0 vote finalist because no matter what he says, no matter what he does, it's being perceived as silly. But, now after this move, and I am genuinely curious who is going to be perceived as the biggest threat between Sam, Andy, and Genevieve. And I want to bring up, because we got a super chat here. So this is from Jay Burn Aquatic. Is Andy's social game so bad regardless of his strategy? And I guess really the better way to phrase this, in my opinion, is his social game so bad because of what happened on day 1 that there's no way he can fix that no matter how good his strategy is?
To me, it is a big hole to dig yourself out of. Cause like we were discussing before, like for people on Tuku and Lavo, like that is the only context they had going into the merge. So it's on the other hand, like if I'm out there on the beach and I see that happen on day 3, and then I meet up with this guy at the merge and I'm like, oh wait, he's like pretty cool and normal. Like I feel like it's actually not as huge a deal now that I'm talking through it. But I think part of what makes me nervous with Andy is hearing what Caroline said in her exit press is like, it felt like the majority felt like they needed to coddle Andy or like they wanted to like support him. And the reason that they let him be on the top of the vote split is because they felt like they wanted to placate him basically.
Yeah.
And so that language and like that description of why, and of course this might just be Caroline's perspective, but that does give me pause as to like how he's being perceived by a lot of people. But I think, we see a lot of genuineness coming through when he's talking one-on-one with people, like when he's laying in the hammock and like whether it's like an apology or like he has this really nice way of like making people feel like he genuinely wants to work with him and like the past is in the past and like he's left the door open for a relationship. I feel like I can't think of exact specifics, but I think we saw it with him and Rachel. We saw it with him and Genevieve, like when she apologized to him. Like I think he does a good job of making it feel like it's a clean slate and it's like, no, I genuinely would like to work together. So I think there is some goodwill that could be picked up there.
And I think even him and Sam, Like, I think all of those are
Exactly.
great
Yeah.
examples, right? Like him and Rachel on night one, Rachel wouldn't stay up with him. She's like, you got to stop this. Like, leave me alone. I want to go back to sleep. And then Andy goes against her. And now later in the game, they're willing to work together. At least he's saying they are. Genevieve and Saul, like, they kind of work with, like, they're willing to work with him and then they're not. And now Sam, somebody who he had to betray to get rid of Sierra. And then he turns around and he says, all right, I'll vote with you in this massive moment.
Right.
He does it. And I think too, what's really been interesting about the season is there's been a lot of desperate players. Like Genevieve totally, I felt like was toothless after the Saul vote. I felt like that was a bad move because it happened too early and she was in a good position. It didn't seem like she needed that for her game. But she's rebounded quite nicely. And a lot of that has had to do with the fact that her and Sam had nothing going for them. And Andy realized that and said, well, I can capitalize this and make this work for my game. And he has made it work for his game. Because a lot of people would just say, let's get rid of those two. If either of them get to the end, they could beat us. Sorry, I don't know if that's a
automatic cat feeder. Sorry, y'all.
Oh, no. Okay. All good. So that's what I was concerned about is like, would they just go Genevieve, Sam? Those are the two biggest threats in the game, right? And a lot of seasons, a lot of the players would just do that. But Andy realized I can use them. I can use them to benefit my game, even if they've worked against me before, even if I've gone against them before. And it's been funny. So I don't know. I thought that was me echoing because sometimes that happens. And that's what I was worried about. So
no, you're good. But yeah, no, I think Andy does a nice job of not burning those bridges and trying to maintain those relationships and being in a position to where he can scoop up those numbers. Cause that's, I mean, like it sounds so reductive and like cliche, but like Survivor is a numbers game at the end of the day, and you need people to work with you to pull stuff off. And even though he voted out Sam's number one, Sam was willing to work with him. And yes, like you said, partially out of desperation, but I think Andy did a good job massaging that relationship with Sam. So yeah, he could mess around. Like if Sam's on the jury, I feel like actually Sam would be a big champion for Andy. Is that wild to say? But I feel like he would be a vote in his favor, or at least like open that discussion.
I actually think that if Andy gets to final three and Genevieve and Sam are both sitting on the jury, Andy's chances of winning actually significantly increase, even if he sits next to Rachel. And the reason is those two know what Andy did to make this move, and they will have pull with that jury. I think Genevieve will have pull with Saul. I think she might even have pull with Gabe. I think Caroline will have pull with all of the Tucus because the Tucus are going to, Caroline's going to tell them, no, this was a great move by Andy. And I think Sam could talk to Sierra. Now, Sierra is her own person. I'm not saying that Sam's going to convince her, but I do think that would open the door to everybody at least being willing to hear out Andy. Now, we had a comment, and I don't know who sent it because I've since lost the comment, but we had a comment on our X where somebody said, I feel that Andy is going to need to play the Marianne game. That's the game he has played where if he gets to the end, he needs to argue it and make everybody know what he did. My concern is, can Andy do that to the jury? Or if he gets a little pushback, will he fold a little bit and that ultimately cost him the game?
I have faith that he could. I think he's a really eloquent speaker. Like it's clear his brain is like he's got this, like, it's hard to describe, but like, you know, his career is in AI research, right? Like he's got this more like objective and like clinical breakdown of the strategy of it. And I feel like he'll be able to actually translate that very well if he makes it to final tribal. But now the question is, like you said, like even if he's there with Rachel, he's got a shot. I'm trying to like break it down in my brain because naturally I've been thinking about the Cody move a lot this week, just since this move was so reminiscent. And something that I thought Jesse did a good job of when he was talking to me about it and was like pitching the move, he had broken down our final six into the big threats, the medium threats, and the low threats. And he described it to me as Cass and Gabler being the low threats, himself and me being the medium threats, which was both like declawing himself and then pumping up my ego, which was smart. And then he described Carla and Cody as the big threats. So I'm curious, as we head into this final six, like clearly to me, Teeny and Stu are the lowest threats, right? Like the lowest win equity. But then it gets a little like jumbled when you get into like who's medium, who's big in terms of, because like I guess Sam and Andy may be medium, and then Rachel and Genevieve as big. But the way that cast has been behaving, they view Sam as a big threat. And like, I'm just curious what you think. Like if you had to categorize them into three pairs based on.
This is the hardest this 4, because I do agree with you. Sue is a clear 6.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think Teeny is 5. And I actually think me and Blake talked about this on our Digging Deeper episode this week, where I said that if Teeny were to go to the other 3 and have Rachel play her block of vote, but then Teeny says, gotcha, Rachel, I'm voting against you anyway. So now Rachel, who thought she was blocking a 3-3 vote and was making a 3-2 in her favor, actually blocked a 4-2 vote. Teeny votes with Sam and Andy, let's say. Genevieve gets her vote blocked. And now Rachel goes home in a 3-2 vote. Teeny can make that pitch at the end of the game. So Teeny has a path. I don't necessarily think it's going to come to fruition, but she has a path. I've heard it 5. So those are my 2 low. What I'm having a hard time with right now is those next 4. Because to me, we've heard so many people say Rachel is the biggest threat out here. She's so good. Caroline, Genevieve, they both said that. They both wanted to get rid of her. So to me, that should put her at the top. We all know Genevieve's a huge threat, but they've also had 2 episodes now to get rid of Genevieve, and they chose not to. So part of me is saying, is Sam maybe in that top tier? Could Andy work his way in after this episode? If I had to bet right now, I'd say Rachel, Genevieve, and then medium would be Sam and Andy. But I am going to be very curious to see how the entire cast reacts to Andy when he gets back on that beach tomorrow or Wednesday.
Well, and it seems like he has a plan for what he's going to say, because you saw at the end of the tribal, he looked at Rachel and it's like, I can explain. Like he's already thought about his damage control and what he's going to do. But yeah, Sam is an interesting one, because I agree with you. Like, to me, the way the cast has been behaving, I think Rachel and Genevieve are those 2 top dogs. But then I'm still so confused what they're doing with Sam. Like, he describes himself as a big threat, or is he just on the bottom and he's the most athletic, right? Like, I think, is that where the lines get blurred in terms of like a threat to win immunity and screw things up for the majority? Or is he an actual threat to win if he sits at the end? And I'm not sure he is. Like, I really like Sam. He seems like a great dude, and I've enjoyed his like narration and watching his story. But to me, as much as people have been saying, like, at different points, Andy and Teeny are kind of getting the Owen Jake treatment, like, I think Sam almost is in that territory at this point. And yes, he's pulled this move off, but that was just because, what else did he have to do? Very similar to my role in the Cody vote. It's like, well, yeah, I'm going to go on with it. Shit, yeah, like, why not? So I'm just a little puzzled if like he actually has win equity, or if he's just like the tallest person left.
So let me ask you it this way, right? Because I think if we do have a 3-3 split here, Rachel is the clear biggest threat over on one half of that 3. But after this vote broke out, how do you think Rachel, Teeny, and Sue are viewing the other 3 in order? If you had to say who they think the biggest threat is, the second biggest, and the third biggest after Wednesday's move.
That's hard to say, because like, what has Genevieve done lately? Like, in their head, they're like, to me, I would view it as like Genevieve is a more dangerous player, like the most dangerous player of the 3. Like, I'd be terrified of Genevieve if I was playing Survivor. Like, she just reeks of Parvati and Kim Spradlin, and like just like gives off this like amazing, charismatic, like smart energy. But like, yes, she organized the Sol vote, but then she's been totally neutered since then. Like, people have not let her do anything. So like, are we talking results oriented? Are we talking about potential? Are we talking about who scares us most to sit next to? That's what I think makes the game so complex and interesting, is like, each of Rachel, Sue, and Teeny has a totally different interpretation of what dangerous could mean to them, or what threatening could mean to them. So it's like, pick your poison. But I think the unifier is that they're all the most pissed off at Andy in that sense. It's like, especially given what Caroline said, is that they really wanted to let Andy have this feather in his cap for taking out Genevieve, and like, they were almost doing him a favor by splitting the votes that way, because they wanted to let him feel in control. Like, they might feel extra betrayed. It's like, dude, we were really trying to like throw you a bone. But and also that's like a little patronizing as well. So like, I could see why Andy wouldn't go with that. So I don't know. I'm really, really torn as to who goes next, because there's, like you said, with the 2 idols, the block of vote, like, on paper, the Andy, Genevieve, Sam side is screwed, right?
Yeah.
Because there's not much they can do. I don't think Teeny flips. I don't think Sue flips. Like, I'm curious how it goes, and I'm nervous it might just be a little straightforward. But the question marks around who is the most threatening to the other three, and like the like a low number of people competing for immunity, like something crazy could happen. Like there's enough variables that something wild could happen. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's been the hardest question for me all week. It has been the hardest question for me all week because part of me says Genevieve should be the biggest threat, because if Genevieve's able to make the Saul move, play as strategically as she did, be a part of Operation Italy, and then still get to the end when everybody was saying, oh man, she's a threat, she's the threat, she's the threat. That's so impressive, and she probably beats everybody. Mm-hmm. Sam also might start to get a little bit of credit because of what he just pulled off, right? Like he was also a part of Operation Italy. He loses his number one right at the merge and is able to navigate that as the biggest physical threat remaining and get there. But then Andy, he makes this move. And either they're going to respect it, which now makes him dangerous, or they're going to hate it, which now makes them hate him. Mm-hmm. So it's so hard for me to see how they're going to do it. And what is so tricky about this, if you're Teeny, Sue, and Rachel, which right now, Teeny, Sue, and Rachel probably all feel like they have a chance to win if they sit next to each other. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be as aligned as they are. Mm-hmm. What makes it so tricky is because of this vote and because Caroline went home, one of the three people of Andy, Sam, and Genevieve, even if you are able to wipe them out, one of those three people will at least get a chance to make fire and sit at Final Three. So who do you think you have the best chance to beat out of those three? I still feel like they're going to say Andy, but are they going to be able to put the emotion to the side and realize they should keep Andy at 6 if they do in fact have the numbers, and if Teeny doesn't flip, and if the block of vote is used how we all think it will be and no other advantages are played? Can they put the emotions to the side in this moment? When we saw an emotional outburst from Teeny last week, when we seen Sue get emotional when she gets blindsided, Rachel, we haven't really seen too much emotion from in a good way, but you know what I mean? Like, this is tricky. This is really hard.
It is. And it's fans are going to think this part I'm about to say is so lame, but like challengeability really starts to matter at a certain point when you get down to it here, because like, thinking back to our final 6, like even before we found out Jesse had an idol at 5, I was leaning Carla anyway, because Jesse was so bad at challenges. Sorry, Jesse, I love you. But like, we have 2 more chances to beat Jesse in the immunity challenge and in fire. Like Carla's been good at immunities. Like, even though he had objectively done more and was a bigger threat, we were cool leaving him around for one more round because we knew we could beat him in the challenges. So like, to that point, I feel like Andy has been the worst at challenges of the 3. So I guess that could play a small role in the calculus that these people are going through. But it's so hard. And that's what makes it like exciting, is like, which way are they going to go? Could someone screw around and win a challenge at the right time and maybe flip somebody and say, like, you have no chance of beating these people? But it was wild when Genevieve was trying to plant the seeds with Teeny and being like, Rachel's playing a good game. And Teeny was immediately like, oh, so you wouldn't vote for me. Like that was tough. Teeny had a rough week edit wise, but I really like them. I feel like they're headed for kind of the Charlie Brown third place 0 vote spot. But I guess if Sue's there and Teeny, I don't know. There's so many different permutations and it would be boring to go through every single one, but just the editing's been fun. I will say, just like the way that everyone has kind of had elements of different like peaks and valleys to their edits and the story being told, I've enjoyed. But yeah, it's like, gun to your head, who do you think's going home next?
Gun to my head, who's going home next? I'm going to go with Andy. Really think that they're going to probably vote Andy out. And the reason being, if you vote Andy out, now you know what? Oh, man, that's hard. Because here's the tricky part. So now there's a gun to my head, and I'm gonna filibuster. You're not allowed to pull the trigger until I give my official answer, guys. Here's the thing. Andy feels like more of a wild card. Genevieve and Sam feel like they're never going to work with you if you're Rachel, Teeny, and Sue, right? They feel like Andy just flipped to them. Andy could flip back to you, but those other 2, they're not really going to work with you. So do you get rid of somebody that won't work with you right here, even if they might be less of a threat? Like, what if Genevieve wins immunity and like what you're saying about Sam is accurate? if what you're saying about Sam is accurate, that they're not really perceiving him as a threat, he's just kind of being called that, but they're not really seeing him as the biggest threat to win the game. And he probably is the smarter person to go home.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess if the gun was to my head, I should go Genevieve. I should go Genevieve because Genevieve's not going to work with you. Genevieve's going to get a lot of votes if she gets to the end. People are going to be, I think, impressed, even though she didn't make. I mean, you probably know better than me. How much does her not making real connections impact her at Final Tribal Council?
I feel like it would be a lot. I mean, we saw my season was won by the person with the best social connections, right? Like we all had pretty equally mediocre to bad strategic games, and then Gabler was the most well liked, and I think that's like, and I think that was our jury didn't do themselves any favors by trying to like be polite and say, oh, fire was a big part of it. But I think we all just know they liked Gabler better than Cassidy. They liked Gabler better than me, and they felt Gabler did maybe slightly more strategically. So like it was all about the relationship. So it's interesting because like, well, I guess it's hard because like Genevieve is saying like, I don't want to like have relationships with these people, but we're like seeing it more from her saying that versus like the behavior being actually exhibited, right? Like it feels like people are open to having relationship with her and wanting to talk to her, and like they seem to like her. So this arc of like I'm finally opening up and letting people in, or like I stopped for a bit but now like I've been a little confused as to like what they're trying to say with that, and if it's like actually true, like if that's just her perception or if like she actually walled herself off at the early merge and is now just like kind of there. I think that can have a huge impact on how like things go, but on the other hand, like if the person you've been calling a threat since the final 11 or whatever is there, like you can't not respect that.
You can't. You really can. And here's my other thing, and I feel like I've brought this up on another podcast, but if some people just have it, right? From a social standpoint, they just have it. They walk into a room, they can light that room up no matter what, right? Like there's a reason why Bryce and Wendell are putting on all these events, right? Bryce and Wendell walk into a room, they make you feel like you're a millionaire along with Wendell. They make you feel great about everything. They'll talk to you nonstop. And you know what? Like the thing is, there are some people who have that where they are so charming and so nice to everybody. And this is not meant to be a knock at Bryce and Wendell, but then they could turn around and say, I don't really actually like that person, but they think I do, right? And I feel like Genevieve has that. I feel like Genevieve is so good, is so social that everybody else thinks they're making these lifelong, we're going to have Christmas dinner, relationships with her. And she's not seeing it that way. And that I actually think is what's hurting those people more when they are blindsided by Genevieve. Because they're like, I thought we were really close. And Genevieve's like, I didn't think we were close at all. That's just
I don't even know who you are. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That one too.
Yeah, no, that's a really, I love that. And that, I mean, perfect analysis. I don't even need to muddle it up with trying to add anything onto that. But that's very astute. Good job.
Thanks, man. Well, does it ever bother you? I see Jay Burns comment here. Does it bother you to ever put palm fronds on somebody? Do you ever think you stay up late at night saying, man, I should just put palm fronds on Ellie?
I didn't view that as my game losing decision to not blanket my tribe with palm fronds. Thankfully, I was awake when he tried to do that, because if he had tried throwing a palm frond on me when I was asleep, I don't even know how I would have reacted.
All this niceness I've seen between you and Gabler at live events, that would be gone if he had tried
right. Blood feud. But no, Genevieve absolutely has that like off the charts charisma. Like do you remember in Winners at War when Ben is talking to Boston Rob and he's trying to be cagey about like, I heard someone say this, and Boston's like, who said it? And then in confessional, Ben's like, I was just like, blah, 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 and it just like fell out of him. Like, I feel like Genevieve could do that to be like, she's just extremely charismatic and might have that kind of killer instinct. But yeah, I think my gut reaction after watching the episode was Andy was screwed, just because the three, Rachel Sutini would be pissed at him, and then Genevieve and Sam, like, as much as they would appreciate getting around further, I feel like they are just at this point self-interested. Yeah. Like they just need to get to the end no matter what. They don't care how, they don't care with who, like they just want to keep going. And if there's a chance to just knock Andy out and give themselves another round further, another chance to win immunity, another step closer to fire, they might take it. So that was my gut reaction. But there's like endless possibilities in terms of what could actually happen.
I think that's a great analysis of this situation though is Genevieve and Sam got what they needed from Andy. Now, if anybody brings up Andy's name, when they bring up Andy's name as pissed, Sam and Genevieve are going to be like, yeah, be angry, be angry, be angry.
Right.
Andy's the worst, right? Because right now, if you're Sam and Genevieve, you're not necessarily playing for an alliance. You're not playing to get the numbers at this point. What you're playing for is get both of us to Final 5. And maybe I win immunity, or maybe they see me as less of a threat. But now you have a 50-50 shot. You really do have a 50-50 shot of being at Final 4 and they can't vote you out of the game. And now you just got to make fire. And if you practice beforehand, you got to be confident.
Yep. And then they're just jockeying for one person. All it takes, if they get to Final 5, the two of them, they just need to convince one person to swing over with them. Of course, no one knows about Rachel's idol. And like maybe say Sue flips or Teeny flips and they vote for Rachel and then Rachel idols out someone. Like you never know. But, that just leaves the possibility open for them to keep fighting and try to make something work. So it's almost like they'd be choosing to punt at the final 6 and vote with Rachel Sutini and vote out Andy, just bing, bang, boom, 5-1 or whatever. They've punted on that one. And then they try again in the 4th quarter to pull over a Sue or a Teeny and see what happens. And then, like you said, worst case, it doesn't work. They're just, whoever doesn't win immunity, they go. And then that last person has a chance at Final 4, So it's hard. And does it create a lot of win equity? Probably not. But you're still scrapping. And that it's so easy when we're watching to just think about like, oh, is this helping their win condition, or is this good, or is this bad? When you're there, it's just like, I just got to be here tomorrow. I don't want that's the only thing on your mind. And that's something that I wish I had thought about more. Like at our final 6 with the Cody vote, I've said this a million times, I'll make it quick, but like there was an opportunity to maybe try to flip on Jesse instead of voting out Cody. There's like a situation where I could have at least explored that possibility, but I was just so geeked at the opportunity and the idea of being there one more day. That's like, cool, great for me, so we'll see what they do. But if they're in pure survival mode, I could see Andy going next.
And so let's think about this real quick. And then I have another statement to make, but let's think about this one real quick. If you're Genevieve and Sam, do you feel right now that you've played a better game than Rachel? Because Rachel, for everything that the audience knows, I don't feel like has really done anything all that impressive on the island. And she does have the hindrance right now of explaining why should we give you the win when Saul literally just handed you something that lets you leave the tribal council when you were going to get voted out 5-1. Because if you're Genevieve and Sam and you feel that way, you're fine getting rid of Andy and then trying to pull somebody over to vote out Rachel, because even if Rachel has her idol or anything like that, you're talking about win equity, preventing Rachel from making a big move for the next 2 votes, even though they don't know about the advantages she has, although they are going to find out about the block of vote as Teeny is spoiling. But blocking her from making a move is a huge part of that battle, because if you're playing a better game than her right now and you don't allow her to make a move, you are going to get the votes, right? It's the whole, college football playoff thing. If you're ranked 10 and you beat the team, then the team ranked 11 who also beats a team isn't going to jump you.
Right. That's a really, really nice breakdown. And I think Rachel is kind of in the same category of Genevieve in terms of being like a theoretical threat, like someone you look at and say, hey, they're probably very good at Survivor, right? But then it's like, what has she actually done? And I think the reason why it's feeling this way is because I think we all know shit's about to go down with the block of vote and her idol, and that no one else knows about it, right? Like there's high potential for her to make a hugely impactful move in these next 2 rounds. And the other people don't know that it's about to happen. So like, that's what honestly makes this, like there is a scenario where this is extremely boring and Rachel just, she blocks the vote. Everyone's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And then she idols somebody out at 5, and then she pulls off her 3rd challenge win, and then she wins. Like there's a possibility where that goes on that way. But yeah, it's like, it is really like critical for them. And now it makes you think, because we have information that Sam and Genevieve don't, it makes you think like, what is their course of action? Because like, I feel like they would probably feel like Sue has very little chance of winning. That's a pretty low priority in terms of like trying to play defense against anything Sue does. I think Teeny's kind of in that territory, and I feel like Genevieve also, like after their one-on-one conversation with Teeny, is probably like, oh, Teeny's like, really starting to, lose it or whatever. So yeah, playing defensively against Rachel, I think you gotta just like keep pumping her up as a threat and as like a potentially dangerous person, and like trying to get a Teeny to see that she's so dangerous, blah 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 blah. I don't know. It's a lot, but I really love Rachel. I think Tiana was my original winner pick, but then on bracketology, I did put in Rachel week 1 after I saw her like long form interview with Mike Bloom. I don't know. I was just really impressed by the way she talked about the game. I felt like she gave off a very calming kind of energy. Like someone in the chat said, yeah, every single person in the jury likes Rachel for some reason. Yeah. And then IceX says, maybe it's because she's so likable. Like, yeah, that's it. Like, to me, she's very likable. She seems very smart. She seems like emotionally intelligent, like someone you could have good chats with out there. So yeah, I think she's my number 1 pick to win, but it'll be interesting to see how they try to navigate around her at this point.
Yeah. And it looked like they really set us up last week for when Caroline went home. It was actually 2 weeks ago now, but they set up Sue starting to bond with Rachel. And I feel like the editors were doing a good job of setting up a storyline that was going to come to fruition when Caroline went home of Sue has now found her next Caroline, and that happens to be Rachel. But that being said, I have to bring this up because when you started talking about it, I got a little excited about something that's probably not going to happen. Could we see at a final 5, let's say Andy goes home at 6, could we see a final 5 where Genevieve and Sam are able to convince Teeny and Sue that, or just Sue, that Rachel is the biggest threat and she needs to go home? And perhaps because she needs to play her idol, because she has the idol, perhaps Sue plays her idol in some scenario, thinking, okay, this is going to be my move. And maybe Sue, I don't think she's thinking like this, but maybe she even votes with Teeny and Rachel for Genevieve or Sam, and then plays the idol for Genevieve or Sam so she can get her move in. And then Rachel turns around and says, actually, I have one.
I have an idol too.
Right? Like, part of me is wondering, could we see both of those idols played perhaps on opposite sides if Genevieve and Sam are able to convince Sue this is a big threat over here?
There's a small chance. I don't think it's going to happen, but I feel like that would be thrilling. That would be so good. You imagine they set up this complex, like, hey, you're going to vote against us, but you're really with us. And then like, it'll be like, oh my God, we've got it set up perfectly. And then Rachel just pulls the rug out from under them by playing her idol that no one knows about. That would be amazing. But I don't think it's going to happen. Because like you said, they have kind of given us that, that tease that Sue is now blindly loyal to Rachel for some reason.
Yep.
So that could be tricky. It's a lot to overcome. And that's why, like, my gut reaction was like, oh, this could be a bad move for Andy, because now he's pissed off the 3 people that have all the stuff.
Yep.
Right? Like, they have all the ammunition. It's an even numbers game, but with the block of vote alone, Rachel, Sue, and Teeny have it if they choose to stay together. So
the biggest problem for Andy is he doesn't realize what is had over there, right? He doesn't know that Rachel's idol could be crazy, because like, I keep thinking, well, maybe Teeny will decide, I'm going to go with them. I'm going to go with the other side, and and Rachel will think, oh, I'm going to play my block of vote. And that's it. And, that'll make it so I have a 3-2 advantage still. But then Teeny votes with Genevieve, Andy, and Sam, so that even when one of the votes is blocked, they still have the majority. But if Rachel feels like something's going south, she can just play her idol. And nobody will see that idol coming. And if Rachel is able to play this idol successfully, that will be her game-winning move if she gets the final 3, in my opinion.
No, 100%. 100%. If she's able to keep propping herself, I almost wonder, this is unfortunately more likely than the cracked double idol situation, but I feel like Rachel, is there an opportunity for her to like try to overdo, and I'm not saying she will do this, but like to prop herself up and like talk a huge game, and then maybe even throw the final 5 challenge and like really try to get the votes on her, and then whip out the idol that nobody knew about. Maybe. Like, there's maybe, like,
why not? If she feels like hasn't done enough to get the votes and she knows she's the biggest threat, why not?
Exactly. And like, let people know she thinks she's the biggest threat. And if I'm her, I don't think this is that crazy of a proposition because she's already won 2 challenges. I guess one of them was when 2 people were throwing, but still, like, she's great at puzzles, as we saw, and a lot of the end game challenges are puzzles. So
or
I don't know.
focus based, which I feel like she's shown to be very good at focus based type challenges. She has. We're 45 minutes in now. We haven't ranked them. Why don't we look at this? So for anybody who's playing our power rankings game, you just got the most analysis you're ever going to get for a final 6 ever. I mean, we just went 45 minutes of back and forth. But if you're playing the power rankings game, I don't know if we're actually going to get 2 people voted out this week. I don't know if we're just going to get 1 person voted out this week. We know there's 2 tribal councils, but as Mike Bloom said, it could end on a to be continued. So rank your people as you always do. And then for the finale, we will go into our whole, minus points, plus points, all of that. We'll get into that. But for this week, you're just going to rank them normal. However, Owen, you and I, because really, why not? We're going to rank them based on how we actually think this game is going to finish out. Because next week we're going to be live on Monday, and I think it might be all of us, me, Alexa, Blake, Will. We might be able to get all 4 of us in there, and we're just going to be discussing part 2 of the finale. But since we're going into part 1 of the finale, Owen, I have you here. Rather than saying this person's safe, this person's not, let's rank them the actual order you think that this is going to play out. So I guess in that case, we should start with 6. Normally we start with 1, but maybe in that case, we should start with,
let's start with 6.
It's definitely going home this week.
Let's start with 6. Oh man, this is so hard. I think, okay, 6, I will say Andy. Just gun to my head. I feel like that might be the scenario. I liked the scenario we talked through where Genevieve and Sam just get into self-preservation mode. So I'll say Andy 6. Am I going 6-1, or are we going to each say our 6?
Back and forth. Let's go back and forth a little bit.
Yeah.
We had Gabler on a couple seasons ago, and we were doing the power rankings. We had the whole discussion for like an hour. He's telling stories that are essentially making me and Alexa cry. And then I was like, all right, Gable, let's get into the rankings. And he just went, all right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I was like, all right, time out. But at that point it was too late. He just went through, and I said, you know what? You get Mike Gabler on the podcast. It's his show. His show.
That sounds on brand. I will never forget reading his like bio. It's like, why do you think you could be sole survivor? Yes.
With an exclamation point. And I was like, Mike, and I remember that was the big thing of like, this guy has no chance of winning.
This fucking guy. Yeah.
And there he goes. And there he goes. And then he comes in his alligator costume with his wife at the New Orleans event, calling Saul the wrecking ball. And I'm like, man, there's just something about this guy's personality that just rings true. But I don't want to go, I'm not going to go the same as you. I'm going to go Genevieve at 6. And maybe this is a little preservation here too, self-preservation, but I'm going to say, you know what, Genevieve, even if she doesn't go as the first person, I don't see her getting past 5, but I'll put her at 6 because I do still think she's the biggest threat in the game. And I think I said this when they voted out Kyle. I think they made a huge mistake voting out Kyle because he really was a one-note threat. Yes, he was he could win immunities, which will take immunity from you, but Kyle's not pulling what Genevieve pulled last week. It wasn't going to happen. No offense to Kyle. You are 2 different players. That is not happening. And that's where I think if you get rid of Genevieve the week before, who cares if Kyle wins immunity? Vote out Sam. It's just easy. It's right there for you. Whereas Genevieve is such a mine for the game. You don't let Omer survive 1 extra vote. Marianne saw that. You don't let Jesse, you don't let Cody or Jesse. You had to get rid of somebody there. And in this moment, it was you don't let Genevieve survive 1 more because you could let her continue on. So I'm going to say they still understand she's the biggest threat. If she wins immunity, obviously that throws everything up in the air. And, immunity is what immunity is. I can't help that. But I think if she doesn't win immunity, Genevieve will be the person voted out this week.
I like that. That's a very sound argument. So yeah, I have Genevieve in 5th for similar reasons. Like she has been perceived as the biggest threat. She's got that charm, that charisma. People might not feel as emotionally connected to her. And if the majority goes with let's get out Genevieve, Sam has no reason to not do that at that point. He might punt. So yeah, I'll say Genevieve 5th.
And I'm actually going to go a little different here. Now I'm going to say Sam at 5, and I'm going to say actually let Andy live.
Wow.
And I know that might seem shocking. And either Andy to me is 6th and he's going home like right away at the beginning of this finale, or Andy is going to be in the final 3. That's really how I'm starting to feel about this. And so I feel like if you get rid of Genevieve, and if you are feeling, because they obviously the people on the island know better than anybody else how other people are being perceived. If you are feeling like Andy can't get the votes, keep him around.
Yeah.
Keep him around. And you know what? Let him get to final 3. I feel that Rachel 100% believes she will beat Andy in the final 3, even after this vote. So for me, I'm going to say Sam goes at 5 because I do think that Sam might have a better argument against Rachel because she was able to, even though she was able to come back against him, he then came back against her and he has made bigger moves than her right now. Ultimately, what I see actually happening is at final 6, we will get a 3-3. Rachel will play her block a vote. That means it's a 3-2, and whoever they want to go home goes home. And then at final 5, if they say, ooh, Rachel's scary, she will play her idol and she will be safe. And now Rachel is public enemy number 1 going into final 4 fire making. But I am going to put Sam at number 5 because I think to Rachel, Genevieve and Sam are bigger threats than Andy is.
Interesting. My only hesitance to that is like, as someone who is part of a big move, no one cares unless you're the one who's the architect of the move. So that's my only hesitancy there.
Do you think that they're seeing Andy as the architect of that move, or do you think that Sam and
I think they do. I think they will see Andy as the architect. And you could make the argument too that Sam, like someone like Sam, might throw Andy under the bus and be like, yeah, that was all him, just to see, like, after seeing how people have treated Genevieve, maybe he tries to do that. But quick sidebar, have you played Blood on the Clock Tower yet? Are you?
I have not. I've seen you all doing that all the time. White runs that, right?
Yes, he does. Yeah. But in that game, like, one of the way you talk about it is that you build worlds, like you're building the different possibilities of way things could go. So I just keep thinking you and I are building 2 worlds of how this final 6 could play out. And I love it because there's so much like variance this season and how things could go.
And I also feel like even if I agree with you 100%, we can't just put the same thing down together here because we are at the point where it's like there are 2 very distinct paths that this season could take. Yeah. Although we are both in agreement here, Rachel, Teenie, and Sue, they're coming out on top.
Yeah, I think so. But I'm throwing a wrinkle because I'm building this world. I'm going down this possibility. So now Andy was at 6, Genevieve was at 5th. I'm gonna say Sue loses in fire at 4. So I think in this one, I think Sam maybe, or no, whatever. This what it makes, because I guess if Sam wins immunity, I feel like he would take off the necklace and challenge Rachel to fire. So maybe Rachel brings Sam. No, this doesn't make sense. Whatever. I'm sticking with it. I wrote it down.
What's funny is you're making the same argument for the 4th place finish that I'm about to make. It just feels like it's going against your.
It's going against my own logic. Yeah. But whatever. I'm saying Sue 4th in some wacky combination, and I'll get to why later. There was logic behind this at some point.
Well, I can give my logic here because I have since eliminated Sam from contention. I've knocked him out in 5th place. So my final 4 is Rachel, Andy, Teenie, and Sue. And I have Rachel winning immunity at final 4 and taking Andy because that prevents Andy from getting one more notch in his belt there. And no matter who wins from Teenie or Sue, that is not a problem for Rachel. She is not going to lose votes to Teenie or Sue. Maybe to Sue if Caroline is proud and everything. But we saw Franny a couple seasons ago. Carolyn, you are who I want to be when I get older. Also, yeah, I voted for Jam Jam. Like, I feel like we could see something similar play out here with a Caroline, or with some of the other women on that jury. So I think Rachel wins, and the smartest move, I actually think in Rachel's book, the smartest move, no matter which one of these 3, whether it's Genevieve or Andy, or Sam, is to take that person to final 3 if she wins the final 4 immunity to prevent them from being able to do anything else. Don't try to take them out yourself because you could win the game even if they're sitting there.
Yep.
But that's how I think this will go. So I also have Sue at 4th. You stole my thunder.
Sorry about that. But yeah, that was Cassidy's logic in taking me. It's just we both had such a terrible read on the game that it didn't matter. But that was her thing. Is like she said, I didn't want Owen to like finish his underdog thing. But anyway, so yeah, I guess in this world I've built, Rachel brought Sam. So 3rd, I have Teenie. I feel like Teenie is just kind of drawing dead, unfortunately. They've had the Charlie Brown kind of, all my allies got voted out, nothing's going my way. They can never seem to get the votes to go where they want them to go. So yeah, I think Teenie as the 0 vote finalist. I hope there is no 0 vote finalist, by the way. But
wouldn't that be nice?
That would be so nice. That
First
would be,
time
what a
since
novel
Worlds
idea.
Apart, right?
Yeah.
No, it was
Oh,
Ryan
no.
Ulrich. Ryan Ulrich got one in Heroes, Healers, Hustlers. He was the last third place finisher to get a vote.
Quick sidebar. Do you think Saul votes for Teeny if Teeny's there?
Oh, man. Maybe my only concern would be if Rachel is sitting in final 3 with Teeny, which we both have. Saul and Rachel had clearly made a very strong relationship. And even if he feels a little betrayed by Rachel, I still think he's going to respect game over anything else. So I think Saul is a competitor at heart, and I think he would probably vote for whoever he thinks played the best game. But that would probably be Teeny's best shot at a vote if Teeny's not able to get anything going here. So, and maybe Saul. I mean, we've seen this before. Maybe Saul throws a vote Teeny's way and hopes that that'll put her into second place.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. So I also have Teeny in third place, and I think that Teeny, all of a sudden the edit makes sense, right? After we saw last week the emotional outburst, which again, I was telling everybody, like, forget what she said. It was the hand movements and everything. I was like, I've done that so many times in my life. That's how I make, when people piss me off, that's how I make fun of them. Like that. And Will was dying on the podcast because he's like, yeah, you've done that to me so many times. Like that's such a New Jersey thing to do. But what I'm seeing is this emotional outburst, never being able to get control in the game, but getting a lot of confessionals, getting a lot of content, getting the story about where do I fit in this binary world as the person that I am. Like all of that information. I feel like it's all adding up to similar to what we got from Ben last season, which is I'm here, I'm playing, I am becoming a better version of myself because of this game. Even at my lowest moments, I am overcoming and I'm becoming better. But ultimately, nobody's going to vote for me because of those reasons, and it's really unfortunate. So I think Teeny is ultimately that 0 vote finalist.
Yep. I'm with you. So then in this world I have built, so I have Sam in second, and then, spoiler alert, that leaves Rachel as the winner in this one. Because, my only thing was Sam, and I could go either way with Sam or Andy, but it's almost like, why are we getting so much Sam? Like, he seems like a great guy. Is it because he's the most like Captain America hot white guy for Midwest Barb to rule over? Like, is that why he gets so much screen time? Or is it because he goes really far? And I'm not saying he's not good at confessionals or anything, because he is. Like, I think he has a nice way of talking about the game. He's pretty charming. But is it like, has he gotten the second most confessionals because he is important in the end game here and he places well? Or is it just because like he is like CBS is still, creating a viewership for 7 million people, and they need they want to milk. God, phrasing. They want to utilize the, conventionally attractive dude that a lot of America will be rooting for. So, and I don't mean that. I'm sure no one would think like, Sam, if you're listening, I'm not reducing you to that, but I'm just like it is a television show, and that is like a question mark. But anyway, that's part of the reason I have him that high.
Yeah. And here's my thinking with Sam, just to kind of piggyback off of that. He's a sports reporter. He's, like you said, you're all-American white guy who's also a sports reporter. And so it's like, this is a guy who a lot of people can relate to, because he, when I think about that confessional he was doing when everybody was looking for the advantage at the merge, that nobody else could do that. And it's like, this guy works for the Tennessee Titans. He had to go up to Detroit, by the way, earlier this year to watch that 52-14.
Oof, brutal.
But so it's like Sam having that, I think, has really helped him get so many confessionals. The thing is, he has 74 on this season, which is the most, right? So I put some.
Oh, it is the most. I was looking at the time tracker earlier today.
Oh, the time tracker might be different, but the time tracker, I always have a harder time tracking down. I just go on
second on the time tracker.
Who has the time tracker?
It's Nintendo Lost is their username.
Nintendo Lost. Okay.
I think Andy is number 1 on the time tracker, but that's interesting that Sam is number 1 by volume of confessionals. I didn't
74 to 65.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's significant.
And a big reason for that is in episode 2, Sam had 16 confessionals.
Jeez.
Yeah. So, but what's interesting is since that episode, Andy and Rachel have made up serious ground on him. And Andy's at 65, Rachel's at 62. And I feel like Rachel and Andy are really like, they're staying right there. And so I feel like with Sam's edit, I could see him sitting in final 3 for sure. Andy, final 3 for sure. Rachel, Teeny, final 3 for sure. Sue, I could even see it. Genevieve is the one I'm having the hardest time of seeing get to final 3. But yeah, Sam's at 74, which is still the most, but I could see him getting past before all is said and done, just because Andy, especially, it does surprise me that Andy has 9 fewer confessionals.
That is crazy. But here, wait, we'll get into this more in a second. But who do you have? I mean, we kind of know who you're leaning. But
yeah, I'm going Andy at 2 and Rachel at 1. I do think Andy's going to get a vote or 2 at Final Tribal Council. I don't think we're going to see an 8-0. I don't think we're going to see a 5-3-0. And unfortunately, I know I think you posted the picture earlier this year, right? Of you.
Yeah. Yes. Me.
Unfortunately, we're not going to get the evolution of 3-2-1 here. I think we're going to get 3-2-2, but maybe it's like a 2v2a, like there's still a little improvement. Although I guess you can't really improve off of 5-3 unless you get a tie vote and then lose on the tiebreaker. So,
right.
So
pretty darn close. But back to your point about like the confessionals and whatnot, it's fascinating looking at the time tracker. And I'll try to send the link in the chat for people to have it.
Yeah.
But Sam and Andy almost had the same amount of time this past week. Andy only had 20 more seconds than Sam, even though he was the architect of this, which I found interesting. But check this out. With the total of the final 6, Andy is at 22:01. Sam is at 20:48. Rachel is at 20:02. Teeny's at 18:02. Genevieve's at 18. And then Sue is at 10:15.
Yep.
So,
and what's funny is that pretty much lines up with the confessionals, except for Sam, because Sam has a lot more than Andy and Rachel, but Andy has 3 more than Rachel. Rachel has 5 more than Teeny. Teeny has 6 more than Genevieve, and then Sue's all the way down there, just 39 confessionals. And Sue had a really strong start. She had what is this 11? I'm trying to do quick math. 18, 20, 25 in the first 6 episodes. Since then, only 14.
Wow. Yeah, that's tough.
It's weird though, because like with less people, fewer people, whatever the word is, you would think that she'd be getting more content, and instead they're doing less with her. But maybe that's just because of, they're really having to play up. I mean, look, I can't complain about any of the editing on this season. The 4 people who I feel are truly in contention here, the editors have delivered all the way across the board with all 4 of them.
Yep. And then Teeny as the 5th person there who still has gotten a significant edit. I love it. I mean, that's what you want to see, is a nice balance. And like this might make sound like I'm sour grapes or whatever, but just like, I never understood why. And I do understand on one hand why 44 was received so much better than 43, but seeing the edit breakdown of their final 6 versus my final 6, it was like night and day. Like 3 of their people in their final 6 got absolutely nothing. And it was just like this, I felt bad for them. Like that's tough. And it made it a little less compelling of an end game, knowing that one of the Tikas was probably going to win. But it's you love to see it. You love to see competitive like product. You love to see characters that you can relate to and you feel like you know a lot about. And I love that there's a lot of variability in how this goes. But I'm with you. I do think one of the original Gata guys makes final 3 and gets a vote or 2. Like I feel like Sam or Andy could be second. And I think this clearly, and we both agree on this, is Rachel's game to lose. Like either she falls short at fire. Like that's really the only way it goes wrong, I guess, is if she loses fire. So hopefully she practiced.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I envision it going as well, is if she loses fire, she would go home. But otherwise, like right now, what's funny is going into the final 6, I don't necessarily think Rachel's played the best game, but I can see the future here. Like I can envision how this is going to shake out. And Rachel, to me, is about to drive every vote from here until the end.
Yep.
If she wins immunity at Final 4, then she's making all the decisions. And if she loses, but she wins fire, well, now she also adds fire to her resume. It's just like, I see the next 3 episodes, the next 3 votes being so monumental for her game that nobody else is going to be able to have even an inkling of control.
Right.
And therefore she wins. And that's why I feel like it is her game to lose, even if I got my first text from my dad about Survivor this week.
Wow.
All season. And it was, Andy's going to win this. He's playing such a dominant game. And I'm like, I needed that casual perspective because I hadn't heard from you in a while, Dad.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, where a lot of people are going. And I don't think my dad's picked a winner right since probably Tony, because he just thought it was funny to have a Jersey City cop. So, like, I feel like Andy is starting to seem obvious. But he's also starting to seem obvious to some other people on the island, or they're just never considering. I mean, Wendell kept saying it at the New Orleans event. boots on the ground, people aren't seeing it. James, last week, I had him on for predictions and power rankings from your season. He was like, I just don't see Andy getting the votes from the people there. And I think Survivor players understand what Andy's up against better than the audience does.
Yeah. Christian made a really good point in the chat. Rachel has no votes cast against her as well. Like that's
all the way down here. Yes.
Yeah, live. Yep. So I think that speaks a lot. And I remember, so Gabler was the same. And Cassidy and I tried to postulate, like, could you make the argument that maybe you got no votes because no one ever wanted to vote you out because people wanted to sit with you at the end? And everyone was like, no, that's not why. And we're like, well, okay. Like, I don't know. But I think it does speak to Rachel's threat management. I think she's done a good job collecting shields. And it is interesting, though, to like, I don't know if this is a complaint necessarily, but there is something off or bad maybe about the audience knowing what Rachel has, and like it's the players have no idea. It's like, we know she's about to like go off, and those poor people have no idea what's about to happen to them. Like, there is something maybe a little less satisfying about that, but there's no way on television to show that, you know, to keep us on the same level as everybody else. Like with Jesse's idol at Final Five, none of us had any idea he had that he had gotten that from Dwight via Janine. But on the show, clearly they weren't going to save that and whip that out at the Final Five. So I don't blame them for doing it, but it is a little different, us being like, oh my God, they don't know what's coming to them. Like, they're about to get dunked on by Rachel, I fear.
Yeah. And so I feel like that's a great point. I feel like the other thing, though, is you and I watch this game like it's our jobs, right? Like, we sit there and we stare at everything. I do feel like unless you're somebody who's listening to these podcasts and stuff like that, you're not even picking up on the fact that Rachel has all of them. Like, you're not picking up on what the editors are putting down unless you watch this stuff as we do. So I do feel like half of the audience is probably sitting there going, oh my God, it's becoming very obvious Rachel's pulling this off. But going into last week's episode, Edgic all of a sudden had Teeny as the front runner. And I'm like, Edgic, dude, when was the last time you guys knew what you were talking about?
That's crazy to me. That is crazy to me. Teeny's edit has screamed Charlie Brown to me, kind of from the merge, but who knows? Not us. Man, we'll see. We'll see how this goes. Anything else you wanted to talk through?
Well, no, I just want to throw a couple questions about you for the future here, because I know Survivor 50 is coming up on people's radars. I've been asking everybody this on their way out. If you could have anybody from your season be on Survivor 50, and it was just like, yep, they're locked in, who would you want it to be?
I think Jesse's the most deserving for my season to go. I feel like he'd be a good representative for the season. He obviously played one of the best games of the new era, like that kind of fallen angel position. Like, if I'm giving the 50 spot 443 to one person and it couldn't be myself, I would choose Jesse to be our champion.
I love that. And then if anybody in the history of Survivor, it doesn't matter if it's like a big player, small player, somebody you just want to see, who would you want to see? They get called on 50. Dalton Ross puts out an article and they're getting an interview. Who do you want to see?
Sean Rector. I think Sean would deserve it. My philosophy for 50 is I think it shouldn't be any winners. I don't think it should be anyone who's played a gajillion times, but I do hope they do some, like, you know, diversity in the eras. So someone like T-Bird, someone like Sean Rector. I'm trying to think who else, like old school, I would vote for if this was like a second chance kind of situation. But yeah, I don't need to see someone for the fifth time or the fourth time. But yeah, Sean or T-Bird would be my vote there.
You're a man of the people, Owen.
Yeah,
you know exactly what to say. I mean, those are the two old school players that people are screaming for the most, because it's like, how have they not played again? And I mean, Sean Rector did a COVID questionnaire with Dalton where he was like, yeah, I thought they were going to ask me for All-Stars. They didn't even ask me for anything. And it's just like, if you ever read that questionnaire, it's great. I mean,
yeah, I remember reading it. And also shout out to Sean too for like the diversity campaign. Like I know he was a big part of that. And like, who knows if I would have ever gotten on Survivor without that. I think I still would have, but you know, like he's made a huge difference in just seeing people. Like I got to meet Karishma in Houston, and hearing her talk about her experience on Island of the Idols, and like, it was a relatively diverse cast for the time, but just like, I couldn't imagine being a player on the bottom and only being one of the few people of color on a season. Like, that would add just an extra layer to it. That would make it horrible. So yeah, the work that they did, that's a big one. I'm trying to think of a less like fan servicey answer. For someone I would want to see on 50, like an underrated, like people always say Reynolds could be a
Yeah.
decent one that is like less talked about. I'll come back to you on that
I
one. I
think
don't know.
they asked Reynolds once and he just straight up said, no, I hated that. Like, I
Oh,
think
really?
I think they had I think for second chance they were considering, because Survivor 26 at this point is the only season that could have a returning player other than a winner that hasn't had a returning player other than a winner. Like, obviously 38, 39 haven't had returning players, but they haven't had the opportunity to. 26 is the only season where the original cast members nobody has come back, because we saw Danny come back from 11 now. And really the only option from that group is Reynolds. And I think they did ask him for second chance and he just straight up said like, no.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
New era dark horse pick. I think Maddie Pamia is great. I love her. I think she showed a lot of chops. Like, obviously she was first boot, so like it probably won't happen unless there's like a specific theme. But I think she made more of an impact on the game as a first boot than a lot of people have who, you know, went much further. So
and went out in such a ridiculous circumstance. Like, I think Maddie has such a mind for the game, and she's been so positive about the whole thing since being booted first. You know, I had Jelinski on this podcast a couple weeks ago, and it's like Jelinski and Maddie they're just so stoked that they even played. You know what I mean? And I feel like they've both grown. I think Jelinski, he was just so young when he played. I feel like this is a guy, you get removed from it a couple years, he'll be like, oh yeah, this. But like Maddie, especially, like, she loves the game. She goes to all the events. I got to meet her very briefly at 44. And you know, like, I was just like, good for you for being as positive as you
She's
are.
such a good sport. And like one of the most fun people to hang out with. She's awesome. So yeah.
And here, we'll throw up Captain Obvious here. Good job once again, Phil. I always enjoy listening to Owen on these podcasts. He has a lot of good insight on the game. Owen, I've been trying to get you on. Also, you got a wedding that kept pushing this back and pushing this back. What's that all about?
Well, yeah, I've been doing so many podcasts lately because I got married about a month ago, and I kept telling everybody, yeah, after the wedding, I'll be happy to come on. And now it's like, some people might be sick of me at this point because I just did the live show in Houston. I subbed for Rob on the Know-It-Alls a couple weeks ago. Grace Leader and I are covering Star Wars Skeleton Crew on RHAP.
Okay.
And then, yeah, it's just been a lot of Survivor talk this month, but I'm loving it. This is such a fun season. I'm glad I didn't get stuck with some dog shit season where now I have to do 6 podcasts in the final 5 episodes on some boring slog to the end. And I mean, thank you, Captain Obvious, for the compliment. But Phil, I love talking game with you. I really appreciate the way you think about it. And I mean, this time flew by. It was fun to kind of break down all the different things, different ways this could unfold.
No, this was great. And I always love having you on. And I tell you that all the time. And when I went out to New Orleans and your wife was dressed up as you, and I'm talking to her and I'm talking to you, and she's got a mind for it just like you do, man. She just,
she's got a better mind for it than I do. Yeah,
she loves it. So it's always a pleasure showing up in the same room as you and Sammy and just being like, wow, thanks, this is going to be good Survivor conversation for the rest of this time. And
the feeling's very mutual.
I have to say too, if anybody ever goes to New Orleans and you want good food recommendations, just at Owen on whatever social media, because he's going to give you the best food recommendations you can have. I mean, we went into that thing as blind as possible, and Owen's getting ready for his wedding, and I was like, what food places? And he just boom, 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 boom. This is what you should get. And we went to all of them.
You were such a good student. I hate when people ask me that and then they don't take my recommendations. So I appreciate Phil sent follow-up photos and let me know, like, we ordered exactly what you said. It was all great. So yeah. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Owen was literally at like his rehearsal dinner, and I'm texting him being like, hey man, what was the name of the place? The Mediterranean place I went to?
Saba.
I'm at Saba eating, and I'm sending him pictures knowing it's the Friday before his wedding. But whatever, man, it was good. And I was like, he doesn't have to say anything. I just want him to know it's there.
I hopefully at least threw a heart on that, even though I might have been busy.
I think you did.
But,
you did. Okay, you definitely did. That was one that you were able to at least do that. So yeah, well done getting through that whole weekend and still giving me food recommendations that if I go back to New Orleans, that's where I'll be going. So.
I have this very deep need to direct people to good food when they're in New Orleans because I'm still traumatized by one of my first years working in the admission office. A family was visiting from Arkansas, and they came for the campus tour. And after the tour, I was like, do you need any lunch recommendations? Y'all want to go anywhere? What do you like? And they're like, oh no, we're already going to Bubba Gump Shrimp. It's just like, no, what are you doing? So I cannot let people come to New Orleans and eat bad food. Not that it's hard to find bad food here.
It is.
I want people to eat the best. So yeah.
Yeah, no, New Orleans is great with food, and it was my first time being there. So I was going in blind, and we were staying with my wife's friend who was a transplant who just moved there a couple years ago for law school. And so she was, she has her spots, but it was nice to get Owen working in admissions. It's like he better know where the good stuff is, because that's how you're going to sell people really on New
Yeah.
Orleans, right? Is like the
Yeah.
food, the food, the
I've
food.
been eating my way around. It's hard to believe. I've lived here for 14 years now. It's
Wow.
crazy. Yeah. My
Wow.
whole adult life. So it's a good town. Come on and visit, y'all.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you all so much for listening. Like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you haven't checked out our recap episode, which is killing it, one of our best viewed episodes of the new era, feels good to have that type of hype around a Survivor episode again. Go check that out. Blake and I did Digging Deeper. Ice X, thank you. One of the best specialist episodes of the season. That's always good to hear. Become a patron, patreon.com/the specialist for the next 10 days. We're still doing a 50% discount for new signups. So if you're interested in trying it out around the holidays, you want people, maybe get a family member to buy you a couple months subscription or something like that, go ahead and do that. We have different tiers, $5, $10, and $20. We're posting 7, 8 episodes a week right now in season. It's going to be crazy. And then Wednesday night, Will and I will be back recapping the episode at 10 p.m. I will be in a hotel room in Disney World recapping for all of you, because that's how much I care about this season of Survivor. So
Man of the people.
I am, man. I can't help myself. I was like, I could get Blake and Will to do it. I'm like, no way. It's the episode before the official finale. I will be in this hotel room doing it. And hopefully my in-laws are fine with being kept awake. We're staying in a suite, but it's like they're going to be in a separate room, but I'm going to be loud as hell. So hopefully everybody's good. But thank you so much, Owen. This was a pleasure. Go enjoy some football, everybody, and we'll see you guys next time.
See y'all.
I got distracted halfway through, Owen. I know this is going to end it, but